5 hours. 10 Ukrainian drones were 57 seconds from striking the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. This was a direct assault on the Achilles heel of Russia's occupation strategy. The target was so sensitive, so dangerously off-limits that the Russian guards, flanked by the S-400 and Krasuka 4, had grown fatally complacent, believing absolutely no one would ever dare breach their perimeter. They were about to be proven catastrophically wrong. This wasn't a salvo of heavy cruise missiles designed for shock and awe. This was a swarm of KH-7 drones, each weighing just 1.5 pounds and costing a laughably low $400. Let's be crystal clear about the target and the objective. Ukraine was not trying to start a meltdown. They were not attempting to create a second Chernobyl. This mission, planned by the shadowy 47th Drone Brigade, was infinitely smarter. The target was the plant's brain, the $50 million simulation center. This facility is where Russian engineers are trained and, crucially, certified on how not to cause a nuclear disaster. Destroying this center cripples Russia's ability to operate their biggest strategic asset. If you were the mission planner, analyzing the geopolitical risk versus the strategic payoff, would you have approved this target or would you have considered it too dangerous? That's the kind of question that keeps commanders awake at night. And the 47th Drone Brigade was tasked with solving one simple, deadly problem. How do you get 10 tiny, low-cost drones past $1 billion fortress? The operation kicked off precisely at 04:30 a.m. Under the cover of a thick morning fog, the Marichka slipped silently from a civilian fishing boat and vanished beneath the surface. For the next 30 minutes, it was a predator in the dark, completely invisible. The Orlan 10 surveillance drones, circling endlessly above, were great at spotting tanks with their infrared cameras, but at 04:30 a.m., they saw nothing but cold river water, completely missing the Marichka's silent passage. At 04:55 a.m., the quiet part of the plan ended and the loud, deceptive part kicked off. 2 modified Neptune missiles roared to life near Zaporizhia. Their target was not the nuclear plant itself, but a nearby BM-30 Smerch multiple rocket launcher position. To the Ukrainian mission planners, it was a giant shotgun positioned to fill the air with deadly shrapnel, capable of shredding the entire incoming drone swarm before it even reached the perimeter. Before the main event could even begin, Ukraine took that shotgun off the table, as the Russian ground forces scrambled to figure out why their rocket launcher had just vanished. The second part of the infiltration unfolded. In Russian-occupied Enerhodar, a 5-man Ukrainian special operations team, ghosts who had been living among the enemy for weeks made their move. Their role was critical, dealing with the crude but effective anti-drone nets ringing the facility. Using a specialized handheld jammer, they created a small, silent gap in the electronic and physical defenses. They were the lockpickers in a high-tech bank heist. Only then did the star of the show make its entrance. At 05 a.m., the Marichka AUV surfaced silently in a pre-scouted patch of reeds just 3.1 miles from the plant. A waterproof hatch hissed open and 10 KH-7 drones, each armed with a 3.3-pound shape-charge warhead, rose into the morning air. The attack formation was a classic deception. 8 of the drones immediately dropped to 130 feet, disappearing into the ground clutter. But 2 of them, loaded with dummy warheads, did the exact opposite. They climbed to 500 feet, making themselves the most obvious targets in the sky. This was a classic boxer's feint. Make your opponent watch the jab so they never see the right hook coming. The trap was set. The Russian defense was layered but fundamentally flawed. Ukraine was about to exploit that flaw with ruthless modern precision. The outer layer of defense was the S-400 Triumph, a system valued at $200 million, capable of tracking 300 targets simultaneously. Its operator, Sergei, saw the 2 high-flying blips appear on his screen and immediately did his job perfectly. But here's the dirty little secret of Russian air defense. The S-400 was designed to shoot down bombers and heavy cruise missiles. Asking it to target a 1.5-pound drone is like using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. It is extreme overkill for the job. The next defense layer was pure electronic brute force. The Krasuka 4 is a truck-mounted system designed to blanket 186 miles in every direction with jamming noise. It floods the area with a massive brute force wall of electromagnetic interference. But the KH-7 drones were ready. The real reason this entire attack worked was humming away inside the 7 remaining attack drones. The heart of the KH-7 is a $90 NVIDIA Jetson Nano AI chip. This is the kind of cheap, accessible technology you would find in a high school robotics project. And it gave the drone two critical advantages that defeated the Russian EW systems. While the massive Krasuka 4 was attempting to jam all signals indiscriminately, the Jetson Nano was running a sophisticated frequency hopping algorithm. This told the drone's radio to jump to a new frequency 1,000 times every second. The massive electronic wall of noise became useless against a target that refused to stay put. The AI chip provided optical navigation. The drone's camera was constantly comparing the terrain below to a high-resolution satellite map stored in its tiny internal memory. But the plan almost went sideways. The Krasuka is a beast, and its raw, untamed power began to interfere even with the Decoy's video feeds, causing them to flicker and distort. Worse, the Russians weren't relying on one system alone. An Orlan 10 drone circling high above confirmed the contacts with its own camera. The S-400 operator was immediately ordered to lower his radar's search pattern to scan the very altitude where the real attack swarm was hiding. On the screen in Orikhiv, this was the moment his heart rate spiked. The S-400 search beam, a digital scythe, began to sweep dangerously close to his hidden swarm. This was the moment the 5-man Ghost team in Enerhodar played their ace. At 05:02 and 40 seconds, as the Russian missiles were closing in on the decoys, one of the SOF team members flipped a switch on a nondescript black box. This was a short-range counter-EW device. It didn't try to block the Krasuka's signal, that would have been impossible. It mimicked and corrupted it, creating a small, localized bubble of pure electronic gibberish. The Russian radar operator, already laser-focused on the decoy drones, was now flying half-blind. A few seconds later, his missiles found their targets. The two decoy drones vaporized. On the Russian command net, the report was immediate. 2 kills confirmed. Victory, Sergei reported. He just spent millions to kill 2 $800 decoys. He had absolutely no idea that the 7 real assassins had just slipped past the security desk and were now heading for the CEO's office. At 05:03, the 7 remaining KHS-7 drones were inside the final perimeter, and Russian commander Sergei's blood turned to ice. He wasn't tracking 2 targets anymore, he was tracking 7. He realized the drone's flight path was taking them directly between his defensive positions and the massive silhouettes of the reactor containment buildings. This wasn't a simple attack anymore. It was a hostage situation where the hostage was a potential nuclear disaster. Engage! Firing solutions must be clear of all sensitive structures! Sergei screamed into his headset. His voice was tight with a new kind of terror. He couldn't just fill the sky with steel and shrapnel. Every stray round, every uncontrolled burst of cannon fire could trigger an international incident. The Panzer turrets traversed frantically, their computers struggling to find a clean firing angle. A Mi-28 Havoc gunship pilot, his hands sweating, carefully angled his gun run away from the plant before firing. This hesitation, this split second of forced caution driven by the fear of causing a catastrophe, was the only window the Ukrainians needed. But the Russians are professionals and the defense was brutal and effective. A Panzer locked on and fired, downing 1 drone in a burst of shrapnel. The Mi-28 adjusted its angle and destroyed another with its cannon. A second Panzer, firing in a controlled short burst, shredded 2 more. The Ukrainian operator in Orikhiv watched in horror. His attack swarm was being methodically dismantled. 4, 5, then 6 of his drones blinked to static. 4 more drones gone in seconds. The Russian defense, though constrained by the nuclear threat, was ruthlessly efficient. But one got through. Through the hellscape of tracers and shrapnel, a single drone emerged like a vengeful spirit. Its operator, the last one still in the fight, used the chaos, the very destruction of his comrades, as a shield. He flew a daring, unpredictable path that kept him in the precise dead zones where the gunners simply couldn't risk a shot. The operator's view was now a dizzying rush of concrete. His target wasn't some huge vent on the roof or a generic wall. It was an insignificant-looking ventilation intake louver on the 3rd floor of the training center. A dark square of metal no bigger than a pizza box. This was the surgical entry point. A keyhole that guaranteed 0 collateral damage to sensitive adjacent structures. His heart was hammering, but his hands were like a surgeon's. This was about threading a needle at 80 miles per hour. On his screen, a small icon flashed. Warhead armed. A quiet digital click echoed in his headset. "Entering the structure," he whispered. The drone plunged into the dark, narrow vent. The camera feed became a claustrophobic blur of metal ductwork. He was inside. For Commander Sergei, watching his radar screens, the last target had just vanished. He let out a breath, believing he had won. He had absolutely no idea that the single fatal bullet was already inside the house. The world for the Ukrainian operator was now a high-speed blur of sheet metal. He was flying blind, navigating entirely from a 3D blueprint of the building that had been burned into his memory from months of intense study. He counted the turns, left, right, then a short vertical climb. His final target wasn't the training room itself. It was the main power conduit and server racks for the $50 million reactor simulator. At 05:03 and 43 seconds, he saw it. A bank of humming electronics. He made one final, tiny course correction and pushed the stick forward. The FPV camera feed dissolved into a screen of pure white static. In his headset, a final, satisfying snap. The operator's voice was calm, professional. Secondary ignition confirmed. Target is dark. Outside, the Russian guard saw almost nothing. A small puff of black smoke coughed out of the third-story vent. The lights inside the training center flickered once, twice, then died completely. There was no massive fireball, there was no deafening roar, just a sudden, unnerving silence. For Commander Sergei, standing amidst his expensive defenses, it was the most terrifying silence of his life. This was not an explosion, it was a perfectly contained assassination. The 3.3-pound shaped charge did not function like a conventional bomb. It functioned like a plasma scalpel. The detonation generates a jet of molten copper, traveling at over 25,000 feet per second. This hypervelocity jet sliced through the 10 inches of reinforced concrete wall behind the servers as if it were drywall. It then vaporized the primary server racks and cleanly severed the building's main power bus. The secondary ignition wasn't a sympathetic detonation from the warhead. It was the facility's own electrical systems committing suicide. The massive, uncontrolled power surge caused a cascading failure, frying every unshielded circuit board and igniting the insulation on the backup power generators. The drone didn't demolish the house, it just ripped out all the wiring, plumbing, and circuit breakers, leaving behind a useless concrete shell. Most importantly, the attack was contained, surgically precise, and executed 984 feet from the nearest reactor. The result was zero radiological increase. It was, quite literally, the cleanest, most expensive electrical fire in history. The strategic fallout of the surgical strike was immediate and devastating. The $50 million training center, the only one of its kind in occupied territory crucial for operating the massive ZNPP, was 80% destroyed. Russian state media was utterly silent on the matter. How could they explain that their billion-dollar fortress was defeated by a $400 flying toy? The official estimate is that it will take them 18 months and over $60 million to rebuild it. 18 months during which they cannot train or certify new operators to run the 6 VVER-1000 reactors. The strategic implication is profound. They physically hold the plant, but Ukraine just seized control of its operational future. They can guard the walls, but they cannot run the power. So here is the final question for you, the viewer, drawing from this exclusive debriefing. Would you have taken this shot? Knowing you were flying a $400 drone just 984 feet from a nuclear reactor, with the fate of a continent potentially resting on your skill and the physics of a shaped charge? Let me know your call, and more importantly, your justification, in the comments below. Did the strategic payoff outweigh the catastrophic risk? This is the kind of debate that determines the future of warfare. In the end, for the price of a used car, Ukraine executed a strategic checkmate. They proved that in modern warfare, you don't need a billion-dollar army to defeat a superpower. You just need a smarter plan, a handful of cheap drones, and the sheer, calculated courage of a single operator to fly a single, perfect mission. If you enjoyed watching a billion-dollar fortress get outsmarted by a garage-built drone, do us a favor and hammer that like button. Share this video with anyone who needs a lesson in asymmetric warfare, or just enjoys watching a bully get a bloody nose. And make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell so you're the first to know the next time a Russian general has a very, very bad day.